All right. And we are live. We are live. Welcome, welcome, family, once again to another episode of the Waking Giant News Show. Today, I have a special guest, and we have a special episode, family. So, I have a request before I introduce the brother here to my left, right. Before I introduce the brother, please, family, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and hit the share button. Feel free to comment, ask your questions. This is very interactive. You know how we do, family. Don't be shy. Um, we're here to have a very important discussion. So we really need your engagement, family. So that's what I wanted to say. As usual, like, share. If you're on our YouTube channels, go ahead and subscribe. On our Facebook channels, go ahead and go over to the Phoenix Local Organizing Committee and hit that like and share button. All right. And check us out, man. Check out that pinned message and check out what we're about. Check out our website, the Phoenix LOC or the PHX .org. All right, family. So check us out. All right. Got all that out the way, family. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Matthew Stewart. All right. Welcome, family. And today we're going to be talking about a pretty, I'm sorry, brother. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Oh man, thank you. No problem, man. I just wanted to jump right in. So, as I understand, well, first of all, introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them who you are, what you do, and all of that good stuff.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Stewart. I don't have a specific title necessarily, but I guess you could call me a community advocate. So I'm someone who's trying to help bring some light to some specific issues and a voice to our community, specifically African American Black population involvement in child welfare.
All right. So let's dive right in, family. That's exactly what we're here to talk about. So, I'm sure you've all seen, and we've all seen the video that's come out recently of the young sister that was with a white family out in California, out in the high desert area, on their way, I believe, to Arizona. They're here now in Arizona, in Mesa, I believe. And in the video, the woman captured the girl looking somewhat in distress, and was trying to communicate with her to see if she was okay. Um, and the girl, after some prodding, eventually told her yes, but was quickly whisked away, by the white family and walked out the door. So that's the gist of it. I'm sure by now we've all seen it. And it's brought up a lot of important questions. It's highlighted a lot of issues within DPS, CPS, Child Protective Services, especially in regards to the Black community. All right, so that's why we're here, family. So, Brother Matthew, to give us a little bit of insight on this, man, and was I accurate in recalling that particular story? I'm sure you've seen it as well.
Yes. So what I would say is, if you have eyes and you are reporting what you see, then you are accurate, right? I think a lot of us get different things from that video, but that video for me prompts questions, right? And the first question is, where is her family, right? Where is her biological family, right? And why is she not with them? I'm sure there's a long story there. But we can tell that this is not her biological family. What were the efforts to locate them? What were the efforts to keep her with her family? What were the efforts to reunify with her family? And, what are the efforts now to keep her connected to who she is, right? To connected to her culture, to where she came from, there's a lot of questions. So that's my big takeaway. And anytime I see a child in distress or a child who's upset, it's unsettling, right? We know children, tantrum and things like that, but this is not a case. It seemed to be she looked like she was out of place. right? And she wasn't comfortable, right? She did look like she was in distress. So as a father, as a Black man, I would want to ask those questions, to provide aid if necessary. And she is our sister. So we should be looking after her and asking those questions and making sure that she is cared for and loved and really provided for and supported the way that we know she was designed and created to be.
Right. And, this brings up an issue, or maybe not an issue, but something that should be highlighted in the Black community, which is the lack of foster, Black foster families, foster parents, and whatnot. So, and that's how a lot of our children get caught up in the system and wind up with these people, because it seems to be not a lot of us out there. And then it seems to be a disproportionate amount of us caught up in the system. I mean, is that what you're seeing? Is this what you've seen? And I bring this up because this is following a string of recent events. Remember the young sister out in Florida that had her baby snatched right out of her arms, right off the side of the highway. And this was about a month ago. Sister that was, I believe, a runner-up, came in third place at on American Idol. Had her baby naturally, and then went to the hospital because I believe the baby wasn't able to feed. They just wanted to make sure everything was cool. I was in that particular situation myself, with one of my children, and we took her to the hospital, and which is a natural reaction, right? So, and then our children wind up getting snatched up from her. Is this something that have you seen this, where it's a disproportionate amount of Black children in particular being caught up in this particular system, whether they should be or shouldn't be?
So absolutely. I'll address that first, regarding the overrepresentation, and then secondly, I heard a little bit about that story as well, and read some of the material. So there is an absolutely disproportionate amount of African American children in care compared to our population. So in Arizona specifically, we're about 4% of the population here, yet in foster care in Arizona, that is 16%. Right. So that data has been decades old, and I'm here. It hasn't changed in many, many, many years. Right. So 4 times our rate in the population. And that's one of the worst in the country, to be honest. I believe, overrepresentation countrywide is about double, if I'm not mistaken. But in Arizona, we are 4 times our rate in the population. So in foster care. And another fact that we should not I gloss over is that there are 9% of children who are identified as unknown or other, right? So that could be our brothers and sisters of mixed heritage, or someone not capturing the data correctly. So the numbers could be much, much worse. This comes from a lot of different factors, right? Who reports, right? Law enforcement, schools, healthcare professionals are some of the top reporters of child abuse and neglect. And it comes down to how they see us, right? And it really is, race is a predictor of poor outcomes in many systems, in a child welfare system, juvenile justice system, poor outcomes and discretionary discipline and education, low birth weight babies and infant and mother mortality. Those things affect our communities at much, much higher rates. The fact of the matter is, there is a decision that is made when our children are removed from the home, right? And that decision is highly opinionated and very subjective, right? And definitely influenced by bias, in a country that we know, has a history of not valuing Black lives. The second point, or the second issue we were discussing with I believe she was a singer who was a runner-up in one of the big shows. That is a very similar story to what we are dealing with across the country, and specifically here in Arizona. A mother who took a protective action, right, and sought help for her child who was maybe not eating. From what I understand, to me, that should be something we commend any parent for seeking assistance and aid for their child, right? And then to come to the attention of a system and to be reported and then to have your children removed and then a new child removed based on an older child's circumstances and situation. Each circumstance is supposed to be looked at individually, but we know absolutely that bias exists in our decision making. We know that bias exists in how we are treated in many, many systems. So what I would, challenge our community is, making ourselves aware, right? Educating ourselves and, playing our part in, doing what we can to support the families who are in need. And don't get me wrong, there are children who are in need and their parents need assistance to help care for them. And we as a community can come together to support those families, but also the families that do not need to be separated. We need to be standing up and coming together to be a larger and connected community voice saying that this is not okay and we will not tolerate it. Because I've also been taught that you cannot change what you tolerate.
Absolutely. That makes total sense. So let me ask you, man, what are some of the reasons that these institutions are just coming in and taking that they're giving for, or justifications for taking the children? Well, what are they saying?
So, child protection agencies across the country are, primarily focused on safety and danger to a child, right? But when that comes with an opinion, right, your view and my view differ, right? That is, that can really impact a family. So it shouldn't be just, how someone feels, like a gut feeling, or, well, I say so that's what it is, right? They're kind of very, I would say weak standards on, what can cause a child to come into care. But again, I really do think it is, the bias in how this country has taught all of us, even us who look like you and me, to view Black people, Black skin, Black faces, Black men as a certain way, Black women as a certain way, Black children, in a certain way, and we need to, one, recognize who we are, right? Not let the country define who we are. And then when they have a definition or perception of us that is invalid or untrue, we need to challenge that. But again, it is perception and how people view each other, and us really, some people expressing their personal opinions or personal views upon another group, which they don't understand. And, we are, unique people, a special people, and it takes one of us to know one of us, sometimes, to be quite honest.
Right. So that begs the question then, the importance of maybe having, well, not that it's necessarily going to be as beneficial maybe, but, more representation within the system to make sure that, maybe a watchful eye is kept over the children. Hopefully, we would think. And you know what I mean, more Black caseworkers and things like that, people actually going out to the homes, really doing inspections, who look like the majority of the children that are in those homes, and coming up with criteria to make sure it's just not so easy just to snatch these children away, because a simple doctor's check is no reason for a situation where now, you're getting your baby snatched, and I realized looking back, that's something that can easily happen to myself and my wife when we brought our daughter in, when she was having issues breastfeeding as well. And she, for the same issue, a dehydration, I believe. So, we had to leave the baby overnight and then come back. But she was fine. She was there. But, you know, there were situations where parents have come back and the babies were gone. So,
Yeah.
next day. So, how do we protect ourselves? We mentioned education in some form or another, but how do we really ring the alarm that this is something that is extremely, extremely important? Because there's more. I think the girl's name is Molly. There's more Mollys out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we ring the alarm in a more astounding way to wake up the community, make it part of our priorities and agendas.
And like you said, whatever that alarm is, I think we need to ring it, right? And then those of us who are in the right arenas, ringing the alarm in those arenas, right? If you work in a specific area, if you work in the hospital, right, and you see these things happen, are you speaking out about those things? Are you bringing those to other folks' attention, right, to say that, hey, this family's not being treated fairly, right? And then where do we stop, right? If we don't get satisfaction at one level, do we continue to pursue that? Also, we all are gifted in specific areas. So maybe mine is foster care, right? And I'm not the voice who can speak out against these things, but if a child does need assistance or someone to care for them, maybe that is my role. Maybe that's how I support my community, right? And then talking to other foster parents or families about what they're seeing. You mentioned earlier about foster families, and we need more Black foster families. I think that also, I say, for one, if the need is there, right? Yes, we would want our children to be cared for by someone who can understand their needs, who can help protect them, who can help teach them, what interaction with law enforcement might look like, or what to be careful about, health and taking care of your body and your skin and your hair, things as simple as that. If we are gifted in an area of education, if we're teachers, right, and we see something happen in our schools, right, who are we talking to? What are we doing within our sphere of influence to kind of raise the alarm and protect in the areas that we're supposed to protect in? And again, we all can't do everything, but as we come together, I think we will be able to find the person who can help a child who might need shoes or clothing, or a family who's struggling to make ends meet and might need some help with a few meals or housing, right? And then the foster care population, the last numbers I was given for African American families actually mirrored the percentage of African American children in care. So I believe the range was in 14 to 16%. But talking to some of the Black foster parents, they mentioned they've never had a Black child in years and years of doing foster care. So that makes me ask another question, right? Why are our Black children not placed in these Black homes? We have many, many Black children in group homes and shelters and congregate care, right? When we know that is not the ideal environment. A family setting is best for a child, right? So are our kids going to the group home, and the kids who are not Black, the white children, the Hispanic children, are they going to the Black foster homes to be cared for and by Black mothers and Black fathers who wanted to help their own people and give a bed to someone that they could connect to, right? That they can provide that warm and nurturing environment for. So those are there are a lot of questions, right? And there are some laws and that prohibit placing children based on race, but there are also laws that promote it, right? So the ICWA law, Indian Child Welfare Act. So native populations have a hierarchy in placement preference, right? So You know, it is preferred that they are with their own tribe, right? They're with, you know, family members and kin, and then if not their own tribe, then another tribe. So, you know, African American children, black families do not have those same protections. You know, so there are, you know, a number of concerns on many different levels. And my first question is, why are there so many black children in care? And if they don't need to be there, right? We just don't need a million foster homes to say, oh, we'll take all these kids who need help. Some of these kids need to be with their parents. Some of these families need to be left alone, right? Not over surveilled, not over penalized, not punished, not told to jump through this many hoops, not a white standard of living and parenting placed on them, right? So our households are different, right? You know, we have a lot of joy and interaction and energy, you know, as a people, and you know, maybe that's a overgeneralization, but every household doesn't look like, let alone applying this white standard to a black household and you making that determination that, well, since it doesn't fit our criteria, this child is in danger and let's save him or her.
That's a good point. So I was just sitting here thinking, while you were speaking about, is there any way we could put in any preventative measures? You know what I mean? Like if, you know, issues are spotted early, you know, is there a place where, you know, the families could go that's a safe place, you know what I'm saying, that you know, these issues could be fleshed out to prevent something like, you know, a entity like CPS coming through. So I guess I don't know. I mean, is there, you know, how do you prevent, you know, something like that from happening? You know, if that makes any sense. No, um, you know what I mean? Like how do we cover, you know, the community, to make, you know, to provide, or is that something that we should be looking to do? Is providing that kind of safe space and that safe arena for families who are struggling to not have to be subject to the system. So a sister like, you know, the couple that went to take the baby to the hospital might maybe have to go to the county hospital, but go to the, you know, the neighborhood, medicine lady or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, or the neighborhood medical specialist in that particular area, as opposed to having to go to this, and, you know, be a part of the system. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And, you know, so that is a familiar concept around circles, you know, to focus on prevention, right? How do we prevent children from going into care? And I'm absolutely all for that. And, you know, when I think about prevention and I think about who can help provide for those needs, I think about, you know, a brief historical step back into where are our faith-based centers, right? When we were excluded from systems, right? You know, you think about Black Wall Street, and when we were excluded from systems and had to create our own community, you know, our own financial institutions, our own clothing centers, our own grocery stores, and how we thrive in an environment like that. So my first suggestion would be, how do we get back to community, right? We need to rebuild that community. And the way we do that is we strengthen families. And, you know, because families make up communities, and to have a strong family, your individuals have to be strong, right? So what are we teaching our sons and daughters, right? Our fathers and our mothers, you know, instilling the values into the entire family, right? Or how are we caring for each other? How are we passing down information, right? How do we, as a family unit, then connect back to that community, right? And then how do those communities connect to create a nation, of people that are working together, you know, and showing love to each other, and, you know, back to the original design. So we need to return to some of the old ways. And yes, it will take some building, and rebuilding, but we have had these systems, right? You know, the African proverb, It takes a village to raise a child. Where is that village now? But the American dream says, go to school, and get a good education, get a good job, and, save enough money to retire, right? Yeah, there's some things in there about, 2 cars and a house and all of this stuff. But there is some less and less focus on doing for others and what we put into and what we sow into this world. It is about me and mine, and not, and my time is valuable. I don't have time to volunteer or I need my money. I can't donate to a cause, and when I look at our faith-based institutions, I see older generations still carrying the torch, and I think about, where was the disconnect? Where is the hand to outreach to grab that torch, right? And as much as it is on our generation, to reach out and grab that torch, we probably need to go back into those spaces with the people with wisdom and the knowledge to ask them, what is the issue? Why are, you all still carrying these loads? But again, I think a lot of it is us focused on self, right? And internally, rather than us globally as a community, as a people together, doing the right thing, right? And loving each other.
Now, you said a mouthful right there, brother, because it seems that everything seems to come down to that. Educating ourselves, building our own institutions, even thinking about ways that we can police ourselves and take care of our own people who are going through situations like this. It requires something. You know what I mean? It requires a paradigm shift for a lot of our people. It requires a relearning of who we are. It requires a lot of love, self-love, and love for yours. So that right there is something we have to overcome as a people, because that is what's hammering us in our head. If we had that, we probably wouldn't have CPS knocking on our doors and doctors calling the system on us the way they do, because we're well taken care of. We have everything is good. We don't even rely on the system, and that could be a problem. But that's another issue for another day. But hey, if we don't do it for ourselves, who else can we do? Who else are we going to do it for? Let me reset real quick, and I got another question to ask you. So once again, family, this is the Waking Giant News Show. I have my special guest, Mr. Matthew Stewart. We are talking about the child protective systems and the disproportionality of Black faces, children filling up this system wherever you go throughout the country, not just here in Arizona. We're highlighting Arizona in particular because that's where we are, but we're this is a national problem, and dare I say an international problem. Won't you hit that like button? Won't you hit that share button? If you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, all right, where we continue to have these engaging conversations that are very, very important, especially in these times, because as we understand, we are at war, family, and if you don't see that, I don't know what to say for you. So this is another aspect of that war. We have to protect our children, right? Now, there were things and that's what I wanted to say. Now, Brother Matthew, with that said, kind of going back to something I stated earlier, and we do have some comments here that I did want to get to real quick before I go to my point about having Black people working within the system and seeing where their minds are, and as far as doing their jobs. So hold that. I want a response from you as far as that, in the sense of, do you see that as even being something that is necessary or effective for the community? Actually, let's answer that now, then we'll get to the comments. How about that? So we won't lose our momentum there. So what do you think about that? Do you think if we had more Black people who were in the system, and conscious of what's going on, being more active and engaged in protecting our children. Do you think that's something that could be necessary?
Well, I think it's absolutely necessary for people to care for their own. So I think we need to be in all systems, right, and throughout the world, not just these systems that we're talking about. If we see an area that there are problems, we need to impact that area, and make some change. Um, and one thing that I would caution us, right? And you mentioned consciousness, right? And I would say, which consciousness is it, right? Because we can talk about collective consciousness, right? And if that is the United States consciousness, right, the U.S. and how you know um, the majority of Americans think, right? Is that the right consciousness, right? Is this a person who can think independently, right? Or do they come to the system, thinking they're going to change the world, and then find out, it's well, my boss says to do this, I need to keep my job, I need to keep my paycheck, so I'm going to do that, right? And then they get away and they shift, right, from what that design is, right? And what draw them to it. What drew me to the system was my son. And I have thoughts about protecting him, right? And if he didn't have me, that would be a really dire situation. So I said, well, let me see if I can help some other kids, right, who don't have someone like me. But I come to find out that it is more so we need to help the people that are the families that they were born into, right, to help them protect their own children, right? And I've also been taught, grow where you're planted, right? So they were, um, you know, that family was blessed with this child for a specific reason. And, if it is our job to help prune and fertilize and bring to that family what they need to, so that child can bring forth the fruit they were meant to bring. I think that's what we should do. But absolutely, we should be in all of the systems, you know, changing them from within. And if we're not in the systems, we need to be changing them from without. And if we run into barriers, we need to go through them, over them, under them, around them, right? There's nothing that we can't do, if it is in that ultimate design of us kind of doing what we were called to do. And one of the most precious gifts on this planet is the gift of a child, and we don't know what that child is going to bring. And if you take that child out of the environment they were planted into, that to me could be abuse, right? The abnormal use of that child being placed in this wrong environment. And so there could be some consequences we have to look at in that realm. And again, outside of these systems, like, where are our minds, right? What is important to us? What do we value? I think about materialism and prestige and power and the appetites that kind of corrupt who we were meant to be. And when we rely on those external things to satisfy us and not kind of turn back to our source, right, and look within for that, because everything that we need is here, right, and it will be provided. So worry and concern about again losing a job, or I can't speak out of turn, or I'm a black man, or I'm a black woman, and I can't say what they would say. I know it's wrong, but I can't speak up. We weren't designed to be subservient. We weren't designed to be ruled. We were designed to rule this planet, right? And do some specific work to bring forth fruit, whatever that is, in all of our different areas of gifting. And so when we believe that, or we don't believe who we are, that's when I think there are problems. So again, getting us back to understanding who we are, before we even get into position, because we could do even more damage, right? Some of the self-hatred, right? I think about some of the speeches, right? Who taught you to hate yourself, right? And this country has taught us to hate ourselves, right? And each other when we see ourselves and our brother and our sister. So again, getting back to that first, like you mentioned, Brother Jay, and absolutely agree with that self-love, right? We have to have that first, because then we can apply love to someone else. And we have to know who we are. And that is inclusive of loving yourself, right? Being okay with being understanding that there's greatness in you, right? So being seen and not heard, all of those things we were taught to make us docile, but we are supposed to be leading, right? Not necessarily people, but in an area that we were planted into, to do some specific work to bring to this world and return to harmony, and caring and loving for each other again, and bringing forth that fruit that each of us was designed to bring forth.
Absolutely. So it would take those people in the system to have that consciousness, that that self-love and understanding, not necessarily I'm here to save the world, but I'm going to make sure that things are done the right way. So if these kids don't need to be taken away from their families, regardless of the color of the skin, then that's what I'm going to do. You know what I'm saying? And if I, so in that case, then I think about, in this system that we know that we're dealing in the system of white supremacy, we understand that they have safety nets and contingency plans upon contingency plans upon contingency plans, but we don't have contingency plans upon contingency plans to protect the courageous ones of us that who are tapped in to who we are, that are able to stand when necessary. So that too can create that kind of I don't know if I should say anything, because like you mentioned, the fear of the job, losing the job, right? Fear of retaliation on the job, retribution, fear of being fired, demoted, whatever the case may be. How to transcend that, if they knew that there was a safety net, so to speak, or if they had protection, a certain level of protection around them, maybe those brothers and sisters that are in the system would be more courageous. You know what I mean? Would take more of a stand, because a lot of us do work in that field, and are part of the overworked caseload workers, and the ones who are driving out to these locations, and some of these homes. We're in Arizona, or way out in the boonies, so you'll be driving for an hour and a half. So at 6 p.m. on the Friday afternoon. So it's like I could see where there can be issues, but if we don't do it for ourselves, man, who are we going to do it for? So let's address some of these comments here. I don't know if you saw this first one, and it's a good one. Brother named Dante said, "I'm curious to know how many children are reported to CPS through the K through 12 school system. If education administrators are quick to consider a Black/brown child as IEP, how often do educators assume CPS is needed in a child's life?" Care to address that?
So I'm not exactly clear on the figures, but I believe law enforcement is about 25%, educators are about 25% of those reports. And every report that is made to the hotline doesn't become or every communication, right? Every call that comes in doesn't always generate a report, right? And then every report doesn't result in a child removal. But I think right now there are over 10,000 children in the system. And I but not very I'm not very fluent with the numbers of, communications that come in and then how many actually result in the report. But again, I know Black children are, I believe, reported at about 3.7 times their rate in the population, right? So percentage wise, we have the lion's share of reports, versus our, representation in the community.
Wow. So then that would beg to also say that we would be more well off to be represented even on all facets, not even just within CPS, but within the education system, within the healthcare system, within law enforcement. And maybe even have it where law enforcement is not even needed. You know what I mean? So because that just creates a whole another thing. So, which we've seen. All right, Brother Jamekus had a comment here. He says, do you see something deeper here with DCS? For example, money motivation, purposely breaking up and targeting Black families, etc. Do you see something going on where it's more of a conspiratorial type of thing happening? Well, I won't even say conspiracy, it's right in our faces. But, even historical, with our children being snatched away from us.
Well, there, one issue is about the financial aspect. Obviously it's a business, right? One, it's a business. Government is big business, right? And, a lot of the information I read is private organizations can do things a lot more efficiently than government, right? So it's a lot of money going into, poor outcomes. As far as incentives, right? I listened to a little bit of Thomas Sowell and Walter E. Williams, Black economists, and I can't remember exactly which one said, you tax, what you tax, you get less of, and what you subsidize, you get more of, right? And so if they remove a Black child from home and place that child in foster care, that is a subsidy. Now, if they were taxed because they have an overrepresentation, would they remove as many Black children? I think things would change, but that's not how the system is set up, right? And they wouldn't call it, well, we're not being rewarded, we're being reimbursed for the care. But to be honest, my thoughts are to the power, right? It is, their system. It is part of the United States, and each state and some counties and other jurisdictions are broke up differently. But we've talking to state leaders, and it is their decision to make, right? If they want to change policy and practice. And there was, and I can't recall the author's name. There was a piece that was written about the child welfare system, right? And it was originally for just white children, right? To save them from, the poor conditions and when some people had a, great idea to help save the children, right? We were excluded from these systems because we weren't worth saving, right? And then, there were a lot more diabolical reasons when they started including us into these systems. And I'm not the best historian on that, but there are some folks out there who are great at discussing the history of the child welfare system, which at once we were included, now we are excluded, now we are over included. Brother Jay,
I'm sitting here talking, my mic was muted. Do you think our people have just given up, and just let the system run its course? Do you think we're just saying, forget about it, and just we're powerless to do anything?
Well, that to me, it takes us back to knowing yourself, right? And knowing your worth, and when times get hard and times get tough, and You know, we can understand when people want to throw in the towel, but if you know who you are, and you know you were put on this earth to raise your son or your daughter, and that was a gift to you specifically. I don't see how a whole person who knows who they are could give up. Now there has been a lot of attacks over the centuries on our people and our mentality, right, and how we think about ourselves, right. You know, we the Emancipation Proclamation, right, didn't free our minds, right, and in many cases didn't free our bodies either, right. um so once you're emancipated, freedom is in your mind. So there's a mentality shift that needs to happen. No, we may not have shackles on us, um you know but if we have been convinced that we are less than, that we are not good enough, or this is all we can do, we're never going to make it out, we're never going to make it of ourselves. If we believe that, that will manifest itself, right? So again, knowing who you are and knowing where you're going is important, right? Too, and I think that comes back to the gifting, right, and what we are all here to do. And working a job is not it, right? Maybe you work a job to gain some skills for a while, but that's not necessarily a true aim, right? And I talk about a lot of things that I've been taught, but I've also been taught if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. So
I love that. That's such a good. That one is so good. I like that. I really like that, and it's so true. I'm sorry I didn't mean to cut you off if I did, but I just wanted to, I was thinking about also as a part of the system. Don't the children age out at age 18? Like once you hit 18, you graduate from high school, you pretty much just said, okay, you're on your own at that point. Here we come back again full circle to the self-love thing. And if we had systems in place for ourselves, once these children's aged out, they had somewhere to go. You know what I mean? Like we would, I think we should look into that as well as instituting things, systems or institutions or business, something around making sure that once our children age out of the system, that they have somewhere to go, and a job, or working for someone in the community and giving these particular skills so they can really make it on their own, not just left with a high school education, but actual practical skills, so where they can take care of themselves by the time they hit their mid-20s or so. You know what I mean? So I think that's also something very important. Now these questions are coming in flying in here. So this is a good one. So kind of circling back to some of the reasons and justifications for, really targeting our children, it feels like in this system. A lot of nefarious reasons. Do you find that there's corruption in the integrity of the workers? Like they actually have some kind of in on maybe fabricating what's going on in these children's lives. Like, do you see that similar to what the police department do around the country? How they kind of have, these gangs or agents within, the actual, department, or these kind of secret little, sects within the department that do these things. So, do you think that there's maybe some kind of nefariousness within the actual workers themselves? Because if you remember the video, I don't know if you've seen the video of it was two videos. One was when they snatched the baby off the freeway. They were surrounding the young lady, and kind of like in a half moon shape. And then there was another video of a sister getting her baby snatched out of her arms in a car, in a carrier, by a police officer. So You know where I'm getting at, brother? Like, do you think that there's something going on there?
So I absolutely do think there's something going on, and when I think about corruption, there are uh, corrupted folks who coordinate together, right? And there also is that individual corruption, right? So if you believe that um, your life is worth more than someone else's, if you believe that you are to rule people and they should do what you say when you say it, right? Outside of a child who's being obedient, right, and obeying a mother and a father, um, if that is your perception of how you interact with the world, um, yes. So that, to me, that is corruption. Now, do I know all of the organized corruption within systems? No, I don't. Do I know there is collusion? Absolutely. So look at politics, right? When something is popular, and you want to get the votes, you'll go along with it, right? You'll compromise your morals um, uh, to make sure you get enough votes to remain in power. Um, and then, someone who has a thirst for power, when that power is threatened or challenged, right? So say in the instance of a mother or a father who's trying to protect their child, and you see some frustration or you see some anger, right? That is a protective nature. If someone is coming for your baby, should you protect? Absolutely. Right. So, but if that person takes that as um, takes it personal, right? Or that aggression is, they're going to place that on the child, and they're going to abuse the child because they're angry. I'm just coming to talk to them about their child, right? And they're expressing anger. They should protect their child, right? And the people who don't rise up to protect their child are the ones we need to be more concerned about. Um, but absolutely, there is corruption in every system. But again, when the Constitution was written, we were property, right? So if we base all of our laws on the Constitution and have to continually amend something that we know was flawed, just because we put the words on paper, it doesn't mean that spirit of those words, or that they will be enacted and carried out, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That wasn't for us, right? So now it's for us because you say so, right? But how about the policies and practices that show that, right? Even as early as, as late as what the 2000s, right? Look at the predatory loans that were infused into our communities and allowed to be there, right? So this, allowing corruption, um, if it benefits someone, it will be allowed, sometimes supported and championed. And I think, unfortunately, there is, there are too many of us who have really those individual um, focus, and that self focus, rather than that greater community, and really reaching out to help someone. And I think of that old Good Samaritan story, right? Who is your neighbor, right? Is the person who treated you right, who took care of you, right? And a lot of these systems are disguised as caring and comforting, and to come help heal and compassion, right? But they weren't designed for that. um, they were dressed. They're now dressed up to look so, and remove themselves from the responsibility of the overrepresentation and disproportionate and disparate impact on our people. So they don't hold the responsibility for it, even though they hold the responsibility for it.
They absolutely hold the responsibility for it. Now, we actually had a practical, not practical, but a real life example of what we talked about, as far as possibilities of a lot of nefariousness going on within the system, where people who are acting corrupt. There was a sister, she had actually, this was her second comment. let me go back to her first one. And I wanted to address this. I believe it was, yeah, the system was a little slow there. It was a little slow. All right. All right. So it was she's mentioning here that, CPS is, what happened, and they took kids when grandmother fights for them, she's turned down. So I believe that's a situation where a grandmother was fighting to get the grandchildren back, or to take care of the grandchildren, and the CPS was like no, because she commented again, for no good reason actually. And here's another one that she said, and then we can address that. Um, it's very much needed in regards to what we were just talking about. I fought for my grandkid to be slapped in the face by CPS supervisors, workers court, just a shame. Then the kids were molested and CPS did nothing. That's something that's horrible. First of all, sister, and I'm really sorry that happened. That's absolutely horrible. But that's something that's also, man, that's very, very prevalent. Our children, once they're taken away from the home, are being abused by these people, in these homes. Going back full circle to the beginning of the discussion about the sister out in California, man, the abuse. Now, the abuse that we're speaking for her is alleged because we don't know. We don't know yet because it hasn't been confirmed that she's been abused, but something certainly did look out of place. But our children are being abused and actually being killed in the system, and CPS does absolutely nothing about that.
Yeah, so and my heart goes out to the sister as well, and I'm sure Brother Jay, we can put some information out there so they can connect to myself or some other resources that may be able to help still. And it's never too late to do the right thing. So I absolutely want to offer my support to anyone who's dealing with Department of Child Safety or related issues. So again, we'll connect, and I'll make sure you have my contact information to share on your platform, so we can connect with families who really need that help. So we do know that, and the data is pretty clear. Children fare much worse in foster care when they're removed than in the general population, right? So we are putting children in systems, right, into, let's say, group homes, shelters, foster homes, where they are being hurt at a higher rate than in the general population, right? So, we're taking them from a situation where there may be some concerns, right? There may be some risk, and we're putting them in a situation where there is proven danger, right? So the there are very young children who are placed in group home and shelter care, and I've heard some terrible stories. And I absolutely believe that, again, us as a community, we all need to be standing up and playing our part into making sure that this does not happen to our children, right? And not on our watch. So whether that is us being foster homes, us being the ones to step up to say, that, I know, this mother, and she may have had a bad day, but she takes care of her children. She does this, and that, and show up to court hearings, show up to some of these meetings, to be an additional voice for her. If there are issues where someone is struggling with mental health issues or addiction, right? What are we doing to reach out to that person to help take some of the burden off them, to talk about some of the trauma they may have experienced, which caused them to go down a certain road. And then kinship care, right, is someone with a close relation. So either a relative placement, or kinship could be someone from, your faith-based organization, or maybe a school teacher who knows this child, who said, hey, I didn't know the situation, I would take this child, right? So that could be a placement for the child. But if there's a grandmother or grandfather or uncle and aunt, right, who's also a Black, an African American man or woman, we are over surveilled across the country, across all systems, right? So we're pulled over at higher rates. We're arrested more. We're charged more, right? And we're given longer sentences, right? So we are at higher risk of not qualifying, right, for that to be a placement, right? You know, there are, I believe, in the process to appeal or file a grievance, but many people don't educate us on what that is, right? You know, and then it's also subjective and opinion, right? Oh, well, grandpa had a DUI 10 years ago, so we can't place the kids there, right? You know, or if it was 5 years ago and maybe grandpa doesn't drive or have a car anymore, but, you know, and, you know, why wouldn't we consider him and talk to him about the circumstances or put some limitations on it, right? Or shoplifting, right? If someone has a shoplifting charge, you know, maybe they hit hard times, and you know, trying to feed their family, or maybe it was bogus, like a lot of charges are, right? But you know, how is a shoplifting charge going to pose um, a severe threat to a child? And again, I know every circumstance and situation has to be looked at individually, but we often don't qualify to be a placement, you know, as Black people because of our system interaction in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, that's real heavy, and I think it really sucks when family members, um, blood relatives who want to take care of the children, who are able to take care of the children, who have everything the children need. The children even want to be with them and are still denied and are disrespected and at the same time. So it just proves that, you know, our lives are just not valued, you know, in the same way. And I wanted to address or see if you had a response for this. If you could, if you could describe step by step what we need to do as a people to begin to mount a real defense against CPS and DCS, what would that be? Like, how would that look like? And you know, a preventative thing. You know,
Mhm.
what would that look like?
So we're working on some of those things, and like I talked about earlier, I think knowledge is the key, right? So if you know who is the go-to to help you fight, right, in CPS, in DCS, fight DCS from taking your child, from, you know, from what they might say in court, you know, do you have, you know, a support network? Do we have somebody we can reach out to, even if it's not me? Is there an aunt? Is there an uncle? Is there a community member? Is there a faith-based organization, right, that we can ask? Are we asking the right questions? So I would say first, right, how can we educate ourselves, right? You know, because the first is self-love, and if you love yourself, you teach yourself, you know, how to take care of yourself, right? Um, you know, and you know, I think it was Denzel Washington when they talk of someone came to him about you know, racism in this country or prejudice, and you know, some of the data, and he said, "Where are the fathers?" Right? And then I think there was a rebuttal. Well, what if someone doesn't have a father? Well, where's the uncle? Where's the grandfather? You know, where's, you know, the person down the street? You know, fathers are a source, right, of information, of knowledge, of protection, right? And if we don't have a father in the home, there are sources that we can access, and if that is mom, that is a source as well, right? So mom may have to play that role as well. Aunt, grandma, you know, we don't know. We know that our history is um, you know, very colorful with being deliberately um, separated, and, you know, breaking our unity. And when we start coming together and talking about things, and how to really work together, and um, not needing systems, right? That's when antennas go up, right? So, you know, we're talking like this right now, but maybe there are a number of groups offline that we are talking about how to strategize, you know, on building that community, building those support networks, that we do not have to allow and tolerate these same outcomes to happen. So, you know, again, my first step would be knowledge and education. And for the brother who asked the question, again, I told Brother Jay that I will provide my information. And what do we do step by step is different for each one of us. So for that, brother, I'm happy to talk to you personally and to help um, you identify your own path on how you are going to help and work to change this system and change the world, and change these outcomes, because we all play a part.
Now you brought up something important too, and or I guess we kind of both did, and that's the family, the family unit. And that Denzel quote is very, very important. The importance of fathers or those male figures, and then we go back into history and find out what happened to the male, you know, to the especially the black male, you know, in the late. Because think about it, man, up until the '60s and '70s, everybody was married. You know, your grandparents were married for, you know, your great grandparents or grandparents, however old you are, you know, were married for 50, 60 years. That was something we did. We were marrying in slavery. So that was what we did. But the fathers were systematically removed from the home during the late '60s, early '70s. By the mid to late '70s, man, you know, it was absolutely ridiculous. And then that wave just kept going. So the destruction of the family structure, I believe, is very, 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 very important in the aspect of our children ending up in this system. The breakdown of that, the lack of something that a lot of us didn't have. So with that being said, what kind of things can be given? Let me go back to this question because it was a good one in regards to the children who age out. Um, who age out of the system. What are some of the things? Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah, but it was about aging out of the system, and what difficulties these kids face when they engage in the world, at 18, fresh out of basically living institutionalized, right? I mean, isn't that kind of, if they don't end up in a home somewhere, they wind up in, a group home with a bunch of kids that they're not lucky enough to, end up in foster care, right? So what are some of the difficulties they face in light of what we just talked about in the breakdown of the family home when they hit the world? I won't even say hit the streets, I just say hit the world when they hit the world.
So absolutely, our youth need to be cared for and educated as well. And again, that brings back to um, creating that environment. How do we get them that knowledge, right? Are we, going to these, Department of Child Safety, and offering mentoring services, right? And saying, hey, we have a program, for youth aging out who can learn, um, you know, um, STEM, skills, right? Science, technology, and I can't remember the E, but and math, right? Or agriculture, right? Are there, are we talking to them about their interests, right?
Engineer.
Music is healing, right? Are there people interested in, producing records, right? And other people, oh well, everybody wants to be a rapper, but why, if that is somebody's area of gifting, why not encourage it, right? Why restrict them to, you know that whole adage of again, get a good education, get a good job. you know there's work, right, that people we need to do, I think it was John D. Rockefeller who they say created the modern education system, who said, we don't need a nation of thinkers. We need a nation of workers, right? And yes, I think we need to do work, but we also need to be thinkers, right? They have, you sit in school for 7-8 hours a day, and that conditions you to be on a job, right? There are so many problems in this world, you know, you know, some people will call that opportunity, right? And it's something, it's a problem to solve, it's a problem to fix, and there's a business out of that you can be created out of solving problems. So I would say, why are we not knocking on the doors to talk about, hey, are there youth in care that we can help teach some skills and talk to, provide some connection to them, to answer questions, life questions, take them out for, I know it sounds weird, ice cream or to get some lunch, to see what's on their mind, what makes them tick. How many people sit down with a teenager and ask them, what's on your mind? Probably not many, right? And DCS case managers are required to meet with them in person once a month, but that's not a father, right? Your father was in the home every day. Your mother was in the home every day. If they had to work overnight or flew in and out and had an occupation like that, yes, there are some exceptions to the rule, but they need constant connection to a source to provide knowledge, information, and guidance. So we should be knocking on doors. We should be creating programs for youth, right? And there are even more African-American youth in that young adult program in the Department of Child Safety than in the under 18 foster care. I believe the rate is about 20% of those kids. And there is, and when you don't have that guidance, you don't have a lead from your parents, the group home has raised you, the streets can raise you, and where is that gonna land you, right? And I know there's a lot of talk about, foster care to prison pipeline, which is real. But why can't we be the interrupters in that pipeline, right? Because that's not where they started at. They didn't start on that track, right? So we need to, reposition them on the right track. And again, we know everyone is not going to hear the message and come around. But the ones who do are absolutely worth you telling everyone that is in your path.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to add that A.G. Gaston also said that for the Black community as well. He said, we don't need any more leaders. We need workers. We need people who are going to actually build institutions and do things. He created 14 businesses, all supplying the needs of his little community in Alabama during the height of Jim Crow, when Negroes was getting lynched left and right. He was building businesses in his community, institutions, schools, movie theaters, grocery stores. And then the students from his secretary school then became secretaries at his hotels and at his other businesses. So he taught that workers. That's an excellent point. And it's not, people who are just walking around with signs and yelling and screaming, at the top of their lungs, or just not, like you said, there's not everyone's going to be in the trenches, but even those who are just tangentially involved, maybe they just share a post or, make a comment or something like that. That's just as important, but we can't ignore, getting your hands dirty and actually do something about it by, working. And we have to work on all levels. Just conversation is actually enlightening me, because I'm seeing how deep the rabbit hole actually goes as far as addressing these particular needs. Because not only are we looking to help our youth as far as not making sure they don't end up in homes where they get abused in, right? But we also got to have a plan for them when they get out. What kind of skills do they have? first we got to make sure that their temperament is correct. So what? Now they have to have counseling because they just spent 18 years in the system and you don't know what happened to them. So they have to be deprogrammed. That's number one, right? And then see what educational level they're at and then supply that. And then once we're there, having the institutions in place to employ them to give them further skills to eventually where they're at the point to where they can be on their own. And that takes just everybody, like you mentioned. It takes psychologists, it takes psychiatrists, it takes doctors, it takes lawyers, it takes educators, it takes spiritualists, it takes all of that, man. That's what this conversation is showing me, because and I say that because not every kid is the same, right? Some kids will not need that. Some kids will be stronger and made to be more independent and able to take care of themselves. Some will need more help, right? So what if we had all of those things in place? That's what this conversation is really showing me. And another comment says, take them to a bookstore or a library and go over books dealing with what they're going through, and encourage them to read about that, and encourage them to really go in and do that particular work right where they are. So at 18, 19, so at 40, they're not dealing with the same issues, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned the brother, and I'm not familiar with his story, and that sounds amazing. Creating that many businesses and putting people to work. And then, I would ask, and again, not something you necessarily have to answer, but a lot of times when we create that, we create a job, right? We create a job for somebody, but, can they grow beyond that? Are we teaching them, how to lead? Right? Are we giving them the behind the scenes so that they can one day leave us? Or are we just happy we got somebody good to push papers and to be on our assembly line, and he's going to be there for 40 years? We should be encouraging, leaders, right? As leaders, it is, should be our goal to create leaders who can create leaders. Right? Not somebody who he comes here on time and he stays late and he gets his work done. Right? We want somebody to change the system, right? We want them to challenge things and to have new ways of thinking, and all, like you mentioned, a lot of great talent that we need, right? And psychologists and lawyers. And a lot of those folks are self-employed, right? They don't work for somebody. They found something that spoke to them, and they pursued it, and they mastered their craft, and then now they're serving that gift to the world, right? And I think when John D. Rockefeller said it, when he created the modern day education system, was to actually steer people towards that assembly line, right? Versus let them think, right? And so I think we also need to be in how we love other people and sharing that knowledge and information and want people to grow beyond us, right? And not be so selfish and hold the knowledge so close and tight that it dies with you, right? Put everything out there and let your mentees grow past you. And how much joy would we get from seeing somebody, rocket past where we were, but we gave them their start, right? So I absolutely, agree with you and would encourage us as a people to, again, yes, sometimes we need a job to make money and provide, but that job is for a specific reason, for a specific amount of time, and don't be scared to leave that, right? When you see those things that tear at your heart, that keep you up at night, that you can't sleep, that might be the problem that you were put on this earth to solve.
Right. I always say that. That's such a good point, man. It's always that thing that we fight against doing is the very thing we should be doing, right? And that's such an important point. So let me ask you, man, what are some of the things that you're working on to combat all of this, as well as the black social workers? What are some of the things you're working on?
So I have a few different projects right now. So I work with individual families to help them reunify with their children. So if there are specific skills they need to learn or areas that they need help with in their life, I try to help support them while they are completing those things. I also am an advocate in that role for families who, you know, maybe there is they need another look at their case, right? Are those children truly unsafe, or are they truly in danger, right? And as we talked about perceptions and how they were shaped by this country, whether it's a black social worker, a case manager, or a white case manager, right? We all have this perception that has been shaped by the United States that, you know, black people, should be treated this way. And this is the standard, and they must meet this standard, right? So there are a lot of families that need help in helping shed light and you know um, refocusing the lens that they're viewed through, right? Because that lens that had them reported, right? Oh, these kids need to come out. Somebody needs to take a look at that. That lens was trained by this state, this country, right? And then that same lens is probably going to be applied by that case manager, right? Whether they know they're doing it or not, right? So again, working with individual families is something I do, but I also think we need a revolution in the system, and we need people who are talking to the system leaders to take action, and that we are not going to tolerate these outcomes anymore, and something will be done, right? If they're going to help solve the problem, which they are responsible for creating and maintaining and perpetuating, we're happy to work with those systems. Now, if they do not want to work with us, we're happy to return back to the systems that can support our people and what our people need. And so yeah, system leaders, we're talking to have them. There's an actual an expert we have talked to from Texas, and she talks about turning the mirror inward. Her name is Joyce James, and she has done some great things in Texas to end disproportionality. And so I like the way she puts it: turn the mirror inward, have people look at how they make decisions, how they treat people, and that we make a lot of decisions based on race, right? And if we can recognize that, one, and then we can come together to talk about how we can change that and not really and not impact the community negatively, like we have been doing. And it's an uphill battle, but absolutely on every front we have to be working on this, and also at the federal level, right? There is a Protection Act for Native American families. Do we need an African American Protection Act, or are there protections in place that we are not flexing to protect black families? When I was someone was telling me about was the 14th Amendment. It's supposed to be what protects us from discrimination and unequal treatment. And I'm not a legal scholar or an attorney, so I'll tread lightly in that area. But there are some things in place right now that if we use them to our advantage, and have the right people, frame the right messaging, and we can really make some change with the laws and policies and practices that exist, working within those, right? And then also, if we're talking about removing ourselves from being impacted by systems, by uplifting and carrying our own people, right, then it will matter less and less what the system does, because we will be caring for our own people, which will extend to our brothers and sisters who may not look like us, right? When you focus on that most vulnerable population, everyone does better, right? So that's what we should be seeking to really help across all systems, right? And again, so this is a combined system, not just Department of Child Safety. There are a couple of different movements. You may have heard some people talking about creating a child well-being system, and those are nice words and they've been around for some decades, but I'm not about talk. I'm about action. I'm about doing it. And, so and there are a couple of people who can speak to what, the things that we're able to accomplish when we come together. So we do have witnesses and testimony of people who can talk about, what a change, education and understanding, your rights and the policies and practice and finding your voice, how much of a difference that makes. So I'd be happy to join you again at a later time, and maybe not even me, but bring one of these parents on who has really reconnected with who they are and found their voice and is actually parenting their children, despite unfair intervention, from systems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Would love to have that conversation, family, because that, who it's happening everywhere. So that's going to feed the entire family, to see that, and help bring and shed more light on the system. And while you were speaking, what kept popping in my head, man, was a think tank. I think, what I'm saying, uh, I think especially around this particular issue of, child welfare, child safety, and the, the systems and institutions that need to be put in place around that to support our children. That's a very deep discussion, and what just kept popping in my head was think tank. Like really sit down, a group of us, and put our heads together. And really, I need to be educated a little more as far as how the system itself works. But having the ability to kind of see the larger picture, I get it, and I see where, the need is so dire, man, that we have to, because let's just keep it real. We're operating in a system of white supremacy. So every time we take an effort or step to do for ourselves, that rings bells up there somewhere, because we're pulling away from something that they need us attached to for their survival. So a think tank will, I think, once we can really sit down and we put our heads together on this, man, and we can actually maybe put systems in place for consequences, systems in place for, zero tolerance for certain things. You know what I mean? It's just something where, or systems in place to where every need is met. Um, they do it. They have 1,500 of those things around the country. There's no addressing different societal and global needs. So there's no reason why we shouldn't. As a community, we have the education, we have the experience, and being real, brother, we got the entire 20th century as a case study. What I'm saying, on our complete existence. In this country, it's a entire that 100-year period. The entire 20th century is a complete case study on our survival, our resilience, our ability to stand under the weight, and all the while our children being snatched from us. We're being lynched and hung. We're being Jim Crow to death, where we're relegated to the back of the bus. The kid you walk, going to a hotel to weekend. Yet we become millionaire athletes. We become millionaire recording artists. We become, on the low, a lot of us don't know, entrepreneur class was real deep in our community. So all of those things were happening, man. And I want to wrap up the conversation. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but family, once again, please hit the like button. Please hit the share button. I hope this conversation has brought some kind of light to your mind, family, on the dire need of addressing the situation of our children being disproportionately overrepresented in the child welfare system as a whole. And in particular here in Arizona, with our minuscule population in this entire state. I mean, I don't even know if we number 1 million, but our children are 14, as the brother said, 14, 15%, 13, 14, 15% of the population within this system. That's a problem. And it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed ASAP, family. Thank you so much, brother. Oh, now you're getting some love right here, brother. I don't know if you can see the comment, but the family is thanking you, for your insights and for your action and your activity, man, and the love that you have for yourself and for the community. So you're getting some love right now from the family. Thank you, Matthew, so much. Light on the subject. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And another one says you shedded some light. Oh, you already read that one. Oh yeah, you shedded so much light on the subject. Yeah, man. Thank you so much, brother. Yep. It's been truly enlightening. All right, family. Thank you very much, brother Matthew. Really appreciate it. Once again, if there's any way anybody can reach out to you, please let them know now how they can reach you, what they can do to help, all that good stuff, brother.
All right, so so I'm not sure if this chat is my first time on the system, but I'll put my email address in there, and also a phone number where you can reach me, and I will definitely reach back out to you and like to talk to you about whatever I can help with, and your think tank. I'm on board with that, and I just want to encourage everyone in the areas, right, that of your gifting, pursue that, pursue your passion. Right? There's a business in that, right? But don't pursue it for business. Pursue it because that's what you were put here to do. The business will come. The money will come. You do what you were put here to do, and everything will be provided that can be successful. So I appreciate your time, and thank you for all the love, everyone who put some love in the chat. Thank you for all the questions, and we are, going to make sure that we bring some more visibility to people so they can reach out if they are having issues, and that we can come together to support you in what you need. And we also need to know what each of us is gifted at, right? So Brother Jay, whatever you do, I need to know that I can come to you for that. If you have problems with DCS, Matthew Stewart is a guy you can run to. And I'm not, I don't know everything about everything, but I'm connected to somebody who has everything for every occasion. So anyway, I appreciate your time, and thank you, Brother Jay. And I know Brother Tremikas couldn't be here, but Brother Tremikas, thank you for the invitation, and so happy to share with you and come together in brotherhood.
Absolutely, man. Oh, he was here. He was definitely here. Trust me. He was definitely here. All right. So thanks again, Brother Matthew Stewart. It was very nice. First of all, very nice meeting you, man. It's been very enlightening conversation. We will definitely be in touch. Your info didn't show up in the chat, but I do have your email address, so we'll be in touch real soon. Family, thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Waking Giant News Show, a community conversation. Tune in again this Friday, 6:30 p.m. for another episode. And thank you, family. Thank you, Matthew. Guys, have a great evening. God bless. And remember, family, in the words of the brother Professor Kaba Kamene, I always like to quote this brother, it ain't over till we win. Peace, family.
All right.